Thank you, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's such a pleasure to have you all attend this very first session of ITU Digital World 2021. It is the event where public and private sector comes together to really discuss the challenges and opportunities of this really hot ICT sector. The event is organized by ITU and co-hosted by the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and will take place virtually from September to December under the theme of building the digital world together. This session is entirely remote, live, and recorded. And of course, the recording will be made available on the event's website. I am glad that you're all attending, and as a participant, please do feel free to use the chat during the session. We want to make it as interactive as possible. And questions addressed to the speaker, you can put it in the Q&A function, and if time allows, we will take it towards the end of the session. You can also upvote a question by clicking the thumbs up, so we can automatically sort them and see which are the most popular ones that you want addressed. So with that, just want to give a brief introduction into this pretty exciting panel that we have with a cross-section of views here. Just starting with myself, my name is Vaishali Rastogi. I'm the global leader for BCG's Technology, Media, and Telecommunications practice based out of Singapore. I have a pretty distinguished panel with me today. We have Ms. Aarti Holla, Secretary General of ESOA, Mr. Jocelyn Karakula, CTIO for Orange Middle East and Africa, Mr. Konstantinos Massalos Kostas, President of the Hellenic Telecommunications and Post Commission, Greece, Mr. Mikael Rylander, Technology Leadership Officer, Nokia, Mr. Miro Salem, SVP and Global Head of AI and Autonomous Networks at Rakuten Mobile, and last but not least, Ms. Neha Satak, Founder and CEO of Astronome. I mean, this was just a small glimpse of who you have on the panel. Of course, their bios are all available on the website if you're interested in seeing more. And now I'd like to invite His Excellency Dr. Phan Tham, the Deputy Minister of Information and Communications in Vietnam, to give his keynote address.
Your Excellency, Mr. Sao Pu Lin, Secretary General of the ITU, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Vietnam is very honored to co-host the ITU Digital World 2021 for the second time. And I warmly welcome all experts, policymakers, operators, manufacturers, industry leaders, and colleagues from all over the world to this first forum session of the ITU Digital World 2021. In this forum session, wide, wireless, worldwide, what's the next for the network? We will have the opportunity to exchange our views on a wide range of issues pertaining to the building of our digital infrastructure, on the future development of our networks in the evolution towards a hyper-connected and super smart society. In building our digital economy and digital society based on this digital infrastructure, governments and private sectors in every ITU member country are working to ensure networks with high quality services, rich content, high speed, and high reliability. New technologies and digital solutions are providing more and more choices and alternatives for more affordable connectivity, particularly in underserved and unconnected areas. So during this session, I do hope we can share best practices from different regions on enabling regulatory framework for public-private partnership in building our digital infrastructure, and so in bridging the digital divide. Ladies and gentlemen, since the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic, ICT services are becoming a very essential right of our people, facilitating the access to healthcare, education services, and allowing them to work from home. However, We are also aware that nearly half of the world population are still unconnected. According to the ITU data, 49% of world population are not connected to internet. So I hope that with closer cooperation among ITU member countries and stakeholders, we can build and expand our networks faster and to achieve sooner the goal of everyone connected by 2030. So finally, I wish to take this opportunity to express my sincere thanks to the ITU Telecom team for their very effective cooperation in organizing this virtual ITU Digital World 2021. I look forward to a fruitful and productive forum session today. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Phantom. Much appreciate your opening and the words on how important this industry is, particularly as shown by the pandemic, and how to make it affordable and serve, the wider society. With that, I'd like to invite the Secretary General, Mr. Zhao of ITU, to say a few words.
Thank you very much, Madam. Excellency, Mr. Phantom, Vice Minister of Vietnam, dear friends, dear colleagues, I'm very pleased to join you for this first forum session of ITU Digital World 2021. Just 2 days ago, I signed a host country agreement with the Excellency Minister of Vietnam for this event. Now, 2 days later, we officially kick off our big event this year. So I'd like to thank the government of Vietnam for their ongoing support and cooperation in holding ITU Digital World 2021 in these most challenging times. I know the COVID-19 pandemic continues to cause great difficulties in Vietnam and elsewhere. I'm very grateful for your continued cooperation with ITU. This is the second year we have worked together to deliver ITU Digital World virtually. And we call this event now is the Digital World, thanks to the initiative and the suggestion from Vietnam Minister. And he considered that call it continuously with telecom seems to be not very attractive. So he suggested, why don't we call it the ITU Digital World? I found that is great. So we changed our name to this ITU Digital World to recognize how the transformation of the ICT ecosystem is accelerating. So ladies and gentlemen, this year is a very special year because it is the 50th anniversary of ITU Telecom events. We started in 1971, marking an important celebration of the industry and the ICT ecosystem, including ITU and ITU Telecom. Coincidentally, this morning, I joined another celebration of 50th anniversary, which is 50th anniversary of Japanese association with ITU. They're called ITU Association of Japan. So I joined the event, met a lot of very good friends, older friends now. They left their activities, they enjoy their retirement, and of course some new ones. But anyhow, that give me opportunities to recognize their contributions to our work. So I made some statement that today, if everybody enjoys the ICT achievement, and the pandemic could not stop us connecting to each other, that is because we have very good ICT telecom infrastructure, and these are developed from the telephone, telegraph, telecommunications, all this to this now internet connectivity today. And all this way long, we have a standard, and the standard is contributed by industry like Nokia. We have Nokia here, and industry like telecom operators, and many Japanese contribute a lot. So that we should not forget them. Today's session launches an impressive 3-month series of high-level discussions with ministers, regulators, industry leaders, along with online networking. Our SMEs program and awards and the virtual exhibition organized by our co-host, Vinan, and our industry members and our member states. We will begin by looking forward at the future networks. What is the next generation of networks will look like, including 5G, wireless, fiber to the home, backhaul to satellites, etc. The potential for these networks is tremendous to enable new technologies and applications and help more people get connected. Still, there are many challenges to overcome. Today's distinguished panelists will offer a wide variety of perspectives from government to industry. I look forward to this exciting session and to seeing you all in October for the opening ceremony and ministerial roundtables of our ITU Digital World 2021. Until then, I wish you a very successful meeting today, and thank you very much for your participation and for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olin Zhao. This was, thank you for the words, and we look forward to a very interesting discussion on the future of networks and what they can do to really enable or close the digital divide, or we should call it digital inclusion. And of course, thank you again, Your Excellency, Dr. Phan Tham, for your opening words as well. So with that, let's launch straight into the panel. And why don't we start with, if everyone's reference to the pandemic, everyone has referenced how the pandemic has accelerated or probably brought to life the value of what everyone had forgotten, which was networks. And so this session is going to really look at what we call wired wireless worldwide. What's next for networks? Now we know the enormous role that networks have, or connectivity has played in this pandemic. If this had happened, for example, in 2000, less than 0.2% of our labor force would have been able to go to work remotely. Less than 1% of folks would have had real connectivity to high-speed to broadband, I should say, forget high speed. So in terms of really being the glue that enabled us to work from home to drive education, it has been absolutely critical. So today I'd like to really cover things like, what technologies are needed to drive more digital inclusion. With the WEF and ITU, we found that almost half the households, 50% of the households, don't have access to high-speed connectivity, so 30 Mbps plus. While we, of course, have 5G being deployed, how can we really gain scale there as well? Are there different roles that satellite can play as a technology in the technology portfolio? As well as, are there different models of sharing that can really drive more affordable connectivity, as His Excellency talked about? So with that, I'm going to jump into our first question, which is, there are so many different technologies out there, and in terms of really helping with this digital inclusion, how do you see, what do you see is needed to really close this gap in a much faster way? Of course, infrastructure is only one aspect. There is affordability and skills, but if you just take the infrastructure angle, what needs to change in your mind? And maybe I can invite Mr. Jocelyn to start first.
Hello, everybody. So Jocelyn Caracula from CTIO of Orange Middle East and Africa. Very honored to be with you today. So when it comes to infrastructure, closing the gap, meaning connect the unconnected to us, means covering the 30% unconnected people in Africa. So I think one thing I will start with is the energy challenge, because when we address this type of problematic, we are addressing the lack of energy problematic as well. So to us, as a network and connectivity provider, I want to focus on both energy efficiency technologies and CSR engagement. So it's very important to us, and I think for the industry, to focus on what can be more effective in developing more, let's say, efficient batteries. So lithium has made many progress and are more solar adapted, etc. But this is a key topic: adapting the solar panel, adapting the AR algorithms that can predict some operation in the power system. That's the first thing. Second thing is that we are addressing region or areas that are very, very difficult to reach sometimes. And we have to promote some technologies that enable some remote deployment, upgrade, release, and operation. I think Open RAN, that will be discussed further on, can be a very promising technology depending on the way the energy efficiency is dealt with and the way the cost-effective levels will be reached. This is very important. Technology-wise, it's very interesting. Let's say business-wise, if it is at well. Third thing, and you mentioned it, backhauling challenge. Backhauling is really a must because when we think digital inclusion, it's not a 2G inclusion at all. It's something that requires significant backhauling capacity. And for that, two technologies we push and we are investigating on is first the low band microwave. Low band means under 6 gigahertz, including LTE relay backhauling, because it's very important to get the possibility of getting 30, 40, or maybe 50 kilometers backhauling with significant capacity. This is part of the promise. And second, satellite with legacy systems that cannot handle really a sustainable digital inclusion for these areas, and low Earth orbits, LEO satellites are very promising. And we are expecting some business models that can be profitable, not only profitable, but at least balanced in order to serve with low latency and significant capacity. So that's for the RAN. And it's very important to us to address that, maybe to change a model with additional players such as full integrators that can handle the full thing, very used to the landscape, etc. That is very important. On the other side of the digital inclusion and capacity challenge, Africa will live, we are sure of that, with the 4 technologies in parallel. So we have a big challenge. First, in managing the spectrum and capacity with optimizing with DSS technologies, which are already used. There will be, I think, extra technologies announcements coming in the coming months or years. That's one thing. And the other thing is to manage all this complexity, automation, and let's say relying on AI, algorithm will be key as well. We cannot manage on a legacy mode such complex and such, let's say, announced and modern networks altogether. So I think this is in 3 minutes, because this was a game. In 3 minutes, these are, in a nutshell, what we think of what will be the challenge to address. On top of that, if I may, in a few seconds, affordability mean devices. When I say Africa will keep its 2G, 3G network for years, is because the penetration of 4G and 5G, 4G devices is really a problematic. And the problematic is really linked to the affordability of this smartphone for low-income populations. So we are expecting technology will address and will enable to lower the price of production and manufacturing in order to promote and to develop this penetration rate. And at the end of the day, that will probably have very significant impact on the usage of connectivity and services inside.
Thank you, Jocelyn. And lots of interesting points, right? Energy efficiency, deployment in difficult terrains. How do you really think about backhauling? And are there other technologies, including satellite, which I'm sure we'll come to soon? And then obviously the whole autonomous and automation in the networks, which I'm sure we'll also come to. So with that, I don't know, Neha, if you have any other elements to add to this thought on how we could really accelerate closing this digital divide or accelerate digital inclusion.
Thanks, Vaishali. Hello, everyone. My name is Neha. I am the CEO and co-founder of Astrom. We are a millimeter wave wireless company developing solutions for rural connectivity. So from my perspective, I think wireless is the way to go if we want to close the gap faster. And we have, as a company, we've been studying the rural connectivity infrastructure gap in developed countries as well as developing countries. And our view primarily come from, the studies we have done in India and, neighboring countries, as well as the US. And what we found was that the gap in the infrastructure remains to be the majority of the areas which are unconnected remains to be within the 15 kilometers kind of distance, from a place where fiber is available. But of course, there are many areas for whom the gap is even longer. So going up till 40 to 50 kilometers, that kind of a distance where backhaul is not available or is very, very weak. So we think that a combination of millimeter wave wireless backhaul and unlicensed, band backhaul, like what Joshua was also basically referring, where low frequency, microwave radios, which can go longer range and possibly lesser throughput, along with millimeter wave wireless backhaul, which can go medium range, but more throughput. A combination of these two can be a very good solution for most of these cases. And then the second problem is, once you deliver the capacity, to the vicinity of the population, how do you really, create the access network? And there, what is important is, of course, to reduce the cost and bring robustness to the network. And we feel that Wi-Fi mesh networks are a very, good technology to look at, very interesting technology. And in fact, as it might be an interesting combination of low frequency and high frequency wireless solutions to work together to solve the both backhaul as well as access problem. And lastly, of course, LEO constellations are a really good, alternative, to solving the backhaul problem wherever there is no possibility of any of these solutions working, or at places where it is more economical to actually get the LEO satellite backhaul. So, so that's kind of what our opinion is, Vaishali.
So thanks, Neha, and we'll get to GEO-LEO constellations soon. But if I just, in your just maybe 30 more seconds, and you think that some of these backhauling technologies you talked about are close to deployment, commercial deployment, do you think it's yet a little bit further out? I mean, what timeline horizon do you have in mind?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's very close to deployment. So for example, in the case of our company, we are developing an E-band, multi-beam E-band solution, which is very unique because we are not doing point-to-point, but now, distributing the fiber capacity from one radio to multiple sites. And that sort of reduces the cost of the radio. And we are already doing trials in India. We'll soon be doing trials in the US. And we are taking along with us, partners who have Wi-Fi 6 solution, Wi-Fi mesh solutions, where we could see real implementations happening as soon as 6 months or so.
Thanks, Neha. And, to build upon what you both said, clearly the topic has come up, which I'm sure Miro has a lot to say on, which is in terms of automation in the network. And I know, Miro, there's a lot of things that Rakuten is doing. I think you'll have started with the dish deployment and the one-and-one as well, if I'm not wrong. So any thoughts to talk about automation and where you see that going, and how far do you think it can go to solve this challenge or this opportunity of digital inclusion?
Okay, thank you for the question. I think it's first of all, we're very lucky to be here and to talk. We're the lucky group, right, in the world that has internet access, that can actually sit on Zoom and discuss this, right? And we're today talking about how the rest of the world that doesn't have the privilege that we have, how can we pass this on to them and give them the opportunities that we have today, right? And I think it's a very important topic. But I think we also have to be honest with ourselves and ask, there's the 2/5 of I think it was like 2/5 of the world's population doesn't have internet access, and 1.3 billion kids that don't have an internet connection in their homes. And we really have to ask ourselves, because are we really serious about solving this problem? Because I mean, we have been to the moon and we're now going to Mars. So we can do things. And if we really want to solve problems, we know that we can actually make those things happen. Ultimately, and I believe that we do want to solve this problem, but ultimately, right, we live in a world where economics is what drives our actions. And if it makes economical sense, then we will solve this problem. What automation and more specifically, what autonomous operations, autonomous networks create is the economics for us to be able to solve these problems in areas where we couldn't have done this before, right? So the fundamental shift that has to happen is the economics by which networks operate, right? Which is, I mean, I work for Rakuten, and I mean, it's no secret that Rakuten has, completely changed the economics of networks, right? Rakuten has lowered the cost of wireless internet access significantly, right? And it is only able to do that by changing the economics, changing how we do things, right? I know we've talked about Open RAN, for example, and I guess more specific, I would say that instead of just saying Open RAN, because Open RAN is like a brand, right? But what we're really talking about is some design principles that if we have, we can then create autonomous networks, which then we can have a world that has access to the internet, access to have the same privileges that we all have. So, it begins with economics. If we can change the economics, you'll get the automation, you'll get the autonomous networks, and therefore have the solutions, and therefore have, give everybody the access that we all have.
Thanks, Miro. And you see that, do you see a world where you find that there will be significant autonomous networks over the next 2 to 3 years, or do you think it's a longer horizon, given that you said economics drives action?
I hope so. That is one of my objectives. So I do believe that there will be, I mean, look, we're not going to go from where we are to a 100% autonomous network in 1 year. Right? It's not a leap, right? It is just like how evolution works. It's an evolution, and we get there over time. But I do believe that we will achieve truly autonomous networks, and that is in fact my objective. And I think that we will achieve a level of autonomy within the next 2 years.
Thank you, Miro. And we'll come back to this when we talk about other trends as well towards the end, and talk about are there any challenges as well in deploying them. Maybe Professor, or Kostas, you've talked about affordable connectivity as a key element in whenever we've had discussions. Any thoughts to add to this discussion on how you see, be it on the infrastructure side or the regulatory side, getting to more digital inclusion?
Thank you, and it is really great to be at ITU Digital World. Congratulations to ITU for organizing this great event. And I would also like to thank the organizers for inviting me to participate to this very interesting panel session. I believe that today we experience a shift in telecoms network towards softwareization. And this heavily impacts also the deployment and the cost of telecoms networks. So I would like to focus on the cloud introduced software-defined networking and hardware softwareization trends, because I really believe that these trends are taking over the telecom industry as a whole. So the days of branded, specialized hardware is becoming very fast, a thing of the past. And commodity servers are taking over even the most traditional and legacy functionalities of telecom core networks, abstracting and virtualizing them. So the developments in the field of software-defined networking and networks function virtualization lower the costs and simplify the setting up and operations of modern telecom infrastructure, which has been traditionally the main market entry barrier for newcomers in the industry. So within the next 4 to 5 years, competition in the field triggered by this trend will apply pressure to telecom providers who resist to embrace lean operational models, who fail to adapt and focus on the market segment that better fits their expertise and corporate culture. So I believe the costs that our next generation networks bring upon us require dense and heavy fiber deployments, but this can be offset by careful resource sharing and planning, together with lowering the cost of core network operations as they become a software-defined commodity and getting virtualized.
Thank you, Professor Costa. So you brought out an important point, the softwareization of networks, and how that can impact the cost of deployment. Maybe just before we close that topic, why do you think that we are not seeing there are clearly a lot of movement towards it, but what do you think is holding back some of the operators from getting there fully? Or anyone in the panel, actually.
Well, maybe if you allow me a comment on this, we for sure experience this shift towards softwareization, but sometimes industry finds it more difficult to rapidly and timely respond to changes like this, because this is a huge change from customized special purpose hardware to something based on commodity servers and software. This is indeed a change. So sometimes it's not so easy for industry to move from one paradigm to another, but I'm sure telecom operators will realize that they have to adapt to this new software-oriented model in telecoms network.
Sounds good. So maybe I can move on gears from, we talked about wireless, but we also touched a huge set of elements, not just access, backhaul, and so on. Maybe if I switch gears to fixed perhaps now, if that's okay. And we talked about the fact that connectivity has to, that 50% of households don't have connectivity globally of speeds over 30 Mbps. And we found that through our work with WEF and other bodies that, that's kind of the speed you need to really run, for families to run a set of applications and so on. And given that 50% of the world doesn't have access to this, what do you see the role of FTTH in this whole equation? And then we'll cover FWA separately and other technologies like satellite as well separately. But what do you see the role of FTTH in this whole equation? And where do you see that go versus other technologies? And again, Professor, maybe we come back to you and just see if you have any thoughts, or Mikhail, if you have others as well.
Do I have the floor?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Well, for sure, fiber to the home, fiber to the premises is indeed a key technology. But for sure, in my opinion, it's not the only interesting access technology these days. So research efforts have made available a number of connectivity technologies presenting different trade-offs with regards to deployment time and cost, maintenance, coverage capability, speed, latency, scalability, being future-proof, customer premise equipment costs. So in my opinion, there is no single technology solution good enough to apply in any given case or country. So high quality and still affordable connectivity typically requires hybrids of technology solutions, in my opinion, taking into consideration specific features of its area, of its country, such as morphology, population distribution, seasonality issues, etc. And I can easily think of Greece, my country, as an example with regards to this. So hybrid solutions would use the right mix of technologies to optimize the connectivity infrastructure deployment and maintenance cost, and thus consumer prices as well. From that point of view, I would see a number of technologies that are key towards the high quality and still affordable connectivity objective. Fiber to the premises technology offers high speed, scalable performance, reliability, low energy dissipation, and appears to be a strong option for densely populated areas. Fixed wireless access, you already named it, and I'm sure it's going to be discussed by the other speakers in the panel in the context of 5G, but also using unlicensed millimeter wave radio like 60 gigahertz spectrum appears as a very interesting alternative to fiber to the home or fiber to the premises, offering high speeds, but also easier deployment. And this is well suited for suburban or rural areas. And we should not forget satellite broadband networks, including those provided by low Earth orbit satellites with low latencies that do provide another promising option. And maybe today we think about low Earth orbit satellites networks as a good option for rural areas, but in my opinion, fast technology developments in the field will make low Earth orbit satellite networks capable of doing more than rural areas. However, there is a common denominator to all the above fixed access technologies, but also to 5G mobile networks as well. Fiber networks are required to all these cases. So except from fiber to the premises deployment, we should also have in mind the fiber to the antenna deployment, especially in the context of 5G, where base station densities are expected to explode. So the fiber to the premises to 5G convergence calls for sharing network deployment costs between different networks. And this makes the co-design of these networks a necessity in order to optimize the network deployment costs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor. And I'm sure we'll touch upon satellite, which has come up again, and FWA in a minute, but maybe Mikael, any thoughts from where you're sitting?
Yes, hi, Mikael Rylander, Technology Leadership Officer in Nokia. So fiber to the home is indeed the choice if you need broadband, especially in areas where high speed and massive coverage is required. Fiber to the home is future-proof. We started out in the industry with 2.5 gigabit per second, and we now deliver 10 and 50, 10 and 25, and we are working on 50 and 100 gig. Fiber to the home has also the lowest OPEX. If you look outside the plant, the actual network, it is passive, so it has a very low power consumption. And once deployed, the network can also be used to serve other customers, not just residentials or small enterprises, but also 5G small cells. So it could be a stepping stone to a wider deployment of different technologies. This is a point to multi-point technology. Predominantly 95% of the worldwide installments are point to multi-point. Is there a couple of challenges then? Yes, there are plenty, but there are different technologies you can use as well. So I would like to say that the telcos can continue to squeeze the copper. So you can actually, with new technologies, squeeze out 100 megabits out of a copper wire. But we can also see that in the telcos, the bulk, the majority has a strategy leading to that more and more fiber to the home are deployed. Same with cable operators. They have a little bit of advantage because they have their own cable network, and they continue to invest and upgrade that. But we can also see now that key companies are investing in also fiber to the home strategies. And fixed wireless access, already mentioned, it is an ideal complement to fiber rollouts in areas where business case for fiber will not work. That could be rural areas with the low density or areas that it will take too long time to deploy fiber. Yeah, overall, we can see that fiber to the home is the mainstream technology for broadband in the development market.
And Mikael, maybe just to build on that, we'll come to FWA and do a deep dive on satellite in a minute, but just maybe before we go off fiber, do you see, we know the business case in dense urban areas or even in urban areas. We also know the case where, in more developed markets where ARPUs are higher and uptake is higher based on affordability. But do you see that the next generation of technologies on fiber, be it XGS-PON or others, do you think there will be a significant, there will be changes in the commercial structure that enables fiber to go far deeper, or you see that in a much more future horizon?
It depends a little bit about the time horizon, but of course, even in these more traditional markets, we can see new business ideas are emerging. One is around the sharing economy. So that is something that we are engaged in. So you can see a lot of examples on sharing economy taking place in completely different businesses, but this could potentially be something also to help lower the barrier for investments, that you can actually share your investments. So that could be applied for pieces of the network.
So let's come back to sharing. Maybe we should move to satellite. So thank you, Mikael, on that. And I guess that has been very exciting as we have, we've seen more deployments in 2020 on the satellite front than I think we saw, double that than we saw in the previous year. We're talking about 5x the amount of satellites, be it LEO or GEO, over the next decade coming up compared to the previous decade. So it really seems like we're seeing intense activity. So Aarti, maybe I can get you to comment. Do you see this emerging as a potent way to complement the mobile access portfolio, right? Or as Neha was saying, playing a pivotal role in backhaul, or just trying to see where do you see satellites going beyond the typical rural areas that we've leveraged it for in the past?
Thanks, Vaishali, and it's a pleasure for ISOA to be here. Thank you again to the ITU for inviting us. Indeed, satellites are already a cost-effective means to bring people online, especially those who are beyond the reach of terrestrial networks, and it's something that we have been doing for years. We are right now, as you said, Vaishali, seeing huge evolutions in the technology, but I would point out it's both in the space and in the ground segment. And this is increasing the satellite offering to the connectivity system ecosystem overall. Higher capacity services, the cost per bit is coming down. And of course, NGSO systems are going to bring lower latency, which is required for some applications as well. You asked about backhaul. Backhaul has been a big part of the discussion so far. And indeed, that's something that satellites have done for many, many years, but not just cellular backhaul, also backhaul for community Wi-Fi solutions, which are increasingly important to bring people online. But in terms of the evolution in our sector, I would note two things. Firstly, that multiple trials have shown that 5G backhaul can already be done via satellite, and work on non-terrestrial networks, NTN, within the 3GPP systems architecture group is also happening to enable specific 5G backhaul features via satellite that are going to emerge within release 17 next year. But secondly, I think it's worth noting that the momentum of the terrestrial sector in investing in satellite is really a testimony to the importance placed on backhaul by mobile operators. Whether we look at Bharti Airtel doubling its investment in OneWeb, which is very high profile, or even lesser known investments like Hungary's 4iG taking a majority stake in the Israeli satellite operator Amos Spacecom. This is all very telling. And I think there are different reasons for this. First of all is the need for a seamless connectivity experience that characterizes many 5G verticals, whether we talk about connected transport, mobile healthcare, global asset tracking, or even making sure that software updates that might be really critical for security reasons, making sure that these can reach all the devices or the vehicles that they need to, regardless of where they are. The second reason is the need to drive growth. So we know that mobile operators are under huge pressure to roll out 5G, but now with the pandemic also really to extend connectivity to many, many more people. And both of those objectives require huge investments, and that means they need new subscribers. And so connecting the unconnected is where satellite is an obvious part of the solution. And satellite can also help optimize the efficiency of mobile networks by, as I said, multicasting, broadcasting content to towers, to the edge, and by doing so, offloading mobile networks from heavy content that is bringing the operators little revenue. The last reason I believe why mobile operators are so interested in satellite is precisely the evolution in the technology and the work on standards within 3GPP. Both of these things are going to make it a lot easier to integrate satellite and terrestrial networks into the network of networks that we often hear 5G described as. So I think in summary, all of this speaks to the convergence of telecom sectors and that the legacy divisions between mobile, fixed and satellite are dissolving slowly but surely. The increasing mobile interest in satellite is very much a public confirmation that the optimum solution for future connectivity really does lie in a combination of technologies, pooling the strengths of different technologies to collectively deliver higher resilience, greater availability, and that too for a much larger number of users. So yes, satellites are absolutely part of the broader telecoms ecosystem, and I do believe we're going to see a lot more use of them by mobile operators, not just for backhaul, but mobile operators are increasingly delivering more reliable and ultra reliable services. And we know, for example, from BT in the UK, that having satellite as part of their network really increases the uptime of their network. Thanks.
Thanks, Aarti. That was a very compelling case for saying we're going to go far more, mainstream in the telcos technology portfolio. And I don't know, Aarti, Neha, if you have any other thoughts to add to that. And then I had another question post that. So Neha, any thoughts?
Yes, thanks, Vaishali, and thanks, Aarti, for giving a great, opening and answer to this question. So I echo a lot of what Aarti has said, but I would like to add a few points on if satellite broadband is good for access or for backhaul. So I do believe that yes, satellites are definitely poised to become part of the broader telco portfolio. And what Aarti says, we are also seeing that in the industry, that a lot of telecom operators, some have announced and some have not announced, are venturing into this space either directly or indirectly. And these are telcos not just from developed countries but also developing countries. But if you look at the current pricing of, or rather the projected pricing of LEO constellation broadband plans in countries like India and US, you would see that it is not really affordable for the masses, at least in the developing countries, because the cost is at least 10 times higher from what a user will pay in an urban area, and about 20 times higher for what a user would like to pay in the rural area. So from my perspective, I think there is a lot more innovation that needs to happen in the LEO constellation to bring the costs down even more, for it to become an affordable access option. But that being said, I think it's a great alternative backhaul solution which I'm really looking forward to, because I think having that one more option, alternate way to connect to the core network can really give really a lot of flexibility to telecom operators to sort of design their networks in the optimal way. And of course, when you utilize capacity in backhaul, you can monetize it more aggressively, the satellite backhaul capacity, as compared to only providing home internet kind of solutions. So at the end of it, I think satellite is great. It has potential, but it also has limited capacity. It's even with the thousands of satellites that will be launched, it can only serve maybe a very small percentage of the capacity requirement in rural areas and remote areas. So what I think is satellites, wireless, backhaul solutions, and fiber, all three of them together, working together, can actually make the business case for rural connectivity more profitable. So it's not just one solution, but actually all three together.
Yeah, and I think we keep coming back to this convergence point, right, which is a portfolio of offerings, and I think everyone's mentioned it. And Aarti, that is one point. I wonder if you have any reflections, which is even in all our work, we can see how much the cost has come down, but still, it is a great tool for certain households in certain areas for access. I don't know if you have any observations on where you see that evolve in the future from where it is today.
When it comes to direct satellite, are you talking about direct broadband via satellite, or are you talking about direct access to mobile handsets? Which one are you talking about?
Broadband.
Broadband. So we have seen a lot of evolutions, especially during the pandemic. Some of our members saw 50% increase in new subscriptions, and in fact the satellite operator engineers had the designation of essential workers, simply because connectivity was so vastly needed, and that was the only way to make connections, right? So there's been a lot of increase in the number of subscriptions, and also in the amount of capacity that's being provided, thanks to so much investment in high throughput satellites. As Neha pointed out, when it comes to LEO broadband, Starlink, yes, it's there. It's only in beta testing right now, and it's certainly not for developing countries. Even if it scales, which I'm sure it will, and the price of consumer equipment may come down, you have to remember that GEO or not NGSO, basically, equipment is basically the same with multiple components removed. So GEO equipment will also scale as the demand for satellite broadband increases, and it's always going to be cheaper, really.
Understand, Aarti, and thank you for that thought. I mean, I'll park my question because I had immediately a question on the business case for all these consortiums and constellations going up, and the 10, 17, 30 billion numbers that are being quoted, but I'll save it for another time. We should move on to FWA for now. And when we talked about the toolkit that has come up, a fair bit, and of course, it's certainly an effective way to close to enable digital inclusion, especially in areas where fiber perhaps is not able to play that role. But every time we talk to the operators, we hear about there's only so much capacity that they could manage on their network, and so. Are there any other future evolutions in technology that you think will enable FWA to play perhaps a bigger role than it plays today? Be it in 5G or otherwise.
Yeah, so fixed wireless access can be a valuable complement to fiber, especially in areas where there are no fixed infrastructure. There it can actually be the dominant broadband provider technology. And as such, we believe that fixed wireless access will be play a key role for bridging the digital divide. Of course, when you start to load the network with data, it is a challenge for the radio network, especially if you also would like to deliver fiber-like speeds. And there are a couple of strategies you can adopt. You can use high gain fixed wireless CPEs. That means that the radio capacity will be used in an efficient way. You can use MIMO, higher order or MIMO CPEs. And this will give more subscribers covered per same cell. You can, of course, use more spectrum. And here maybe we can talk about novel technologies in a way that they are not massively deployed globally. Millimeter wave is such a technology where we can use more spectrum. And also multi-user massive MIMO kind of applications. We see a future in fixed wireless access. But we shouldn't forget that you can actually also in fixed wireless access use a stepwise approach. If you don't want to have very high speed rates, you can use outdoor CPEs. You can use direct line of sight. That means that you will get a very robust and efficient fixed wireless network. Nokia, and I can give examples on where we introduced this to connect schools in Kenya that are previously not connected. So it's a cooperation between Nokia, Safaricom, and UNICEF. So you can use fixed wireless access as a stepwise approach. And of course, you can do then the backhaul with many of those technologies that we have discussed here. Yeah, I think I'll stop there.
Thanks, Mikael. And I don't know, Aarti, any thoughts on this as well?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree that fixed services have a role to play and are complementary to satellite. Unlike traditional fixed services, obviously FWA is intended to be point to multi-point, which means that you have towers with FWA technology that can point to many more users, like schools, internet cafes, homes, etc., at the same time. But while FWA can connect more users, a couple of points to note. One is it's not on the move like we expect from 4G, 5G mobile connectivity per se. And on top of that, when we look at the real deployments of FWA so far, it's only actually happening in urban areas, simply because it requires a connection to the backbone. So I think we need to be careful when we make statements about FWA, 4G, 5G have potential to bridge the digital divide. Sure, they do, but certainly not as standalone solutions because they all need to be backhauled. And for that, you need a mix of technologies, including satellite. As Mikael said, it's very good where fiber is not available. And that's exactly what RAIN networks in South Africa, for example, is doing. But when you look carefully, as I said, it's only in certain metropolitan areas. It's only in a fixed location. By the way, I think it's worth pointing out that it's being provided in South Africa using C-band spectrum. The vendors themselves have recently made it very clear that C-band is not a coverage band. So it's not for the digital divide, and it's only going to be deployed in urban areas, just like what you're seeing in reality. I think what's important to remember when you have conversations about the digital divide is in countries or regions like Africa, where you lack reliable and ubiquitous infrastructure, and you have many pockets of dispersed communities which are not economically viable to connect by terrestrial means alone, there you can't really propose this kind of technology. What FWA is really doing is firstly helping operators cope with capacity demand in areas where there's no fiber, but it's not extending the reach of connectivity in any meaningful way outside urban areas. And secondly, it's allowing operators to offer more connectivity without using mobile spectrum or waiting for new 5G mobile spectrum allocations. So to my mind, to speak about FWA and the digital divide in one statement is difficult. And I think it's particularly misleading for policymakers. The only way to talk meaningfully about the digital divide at all is to refer to a mix of technologies.
Point noted and point well taken, Aarti. And I think it's a great point. You're absolutely right. And I wonder whether either Mikkel, Miro, or Jocelyn have a point of view on this, which is we're hearing testing of FWA in rural areas using millimeter wave. And it's yet in testing. And I don't know if we see that having some potential, but otherwise I'm with you, Aarti. It is not really being used as a major weapon for digital inclusion. And also not to mention the stress it puts on the network and the cost. So it can only be used as one element of the broader portfolio, as you said. So I don't know if Mikkel or Miro or Jocelyn, you have a point of view on what we are seeing in some of the testing in rural areas of FWA deployments using millimeter wave. Do you think that?
Mikkel here, I can give one comment. I mean, even also here, the technology is progressing. So we can today reach further and further also with millimeter wave. So it is definitely a technology that can be used on longer distances than we think today in urban environments. So there are a lot of these examples around.
So hopefully having perhaps a broader range than perhaps what we are seeing more commonly today. Any other thoughts on this before we move to one of the hot topics, which is on 5G and what do we see actually happening on the ground? Any last comments from any of the panelists before we switch gears?
Yeah, I can just give a brief comment on that. I think thinking of these as one solution that will fix all the problems, and maybe isn't the maybe that's not the approach. But if we think of these as a set of tools that use the right tool at the right place, and we'll focus on solving a problem, then or a combination of tools, right, to solve a problem, then I think you'll find that they're all great tools and they all have their own advantages and disadvantages. And if you just use it in the right place, you'll find that there's really a lot of great things about fixed wireless. There's also great things about space networks, if you will, right? It's just like which tool to use where. I think that's just my brief comment on this.
I think, Miro, we've all as a panel agreed that it's a portfolio of technologies. You're spot on. I think we've all agreed that there is more convergence happening than less in the past. It obviously then adds complexity. So I think point well taken. So I think that and I guess what we were trying to see is whether we can push the boundaries of where they were typically deployed and broaden the use that we normally saw them used with. So absolutely. I guess for our panelists, we've been having a good discussion. I guess for our audience, perhaps we should just do a quick poll on the question that comes up in 5G quite often, right? Which is, we've had over 150 deployments worldwide, and the question that was posed when we were busy launching 5G across the world is, where do we see the business case, right? Where do we see the incremental or new revenue streams in 5G come from? And we'll get a poll from our audience, which is, do you see the biggest growth for new 5G revenue streams by 2025 coming from B2C use cases on access? Do you see it on B2C use cases like gaming or content using AR, VR? Do you see it in B2B IoT type use cases? Do you see it in B2B ultra low latency industrial use cases? Just want to get a sense for where you're seeing the biggest incremental growth in terms of 5G revenue streams. So if you click a button and let's see where we get. guess I don't know if we have any results from the poll. Wow. So we're seeing, okay, so clearly we have a winner which says B2B IoT use cases, so massive IoT use cases, and I guess, and in B2C. So interesting. Maybe we can get to the panelists now after we've heard from the audience on this topic, which is, there's been so much excitement on 5G, and we've talked about B2C use cases, B2B use cases, and it's been an integral part, right, of the business case that has been put forth for 5G deployment. How do you see this material? How have you seen this materialize on the ground? Are you seeing a world beyond just eMBB for B2C? Are you really seeing mass deployments of IoT? Any thoughts? Maybe we start with you, Mikael, and then go to Miro.
Yeah, so the market development in 5G, we are seeing strong progress in both Asia, North America, and Western Europe. This is driven by new partnerships between CSPs, web scalers, and enterprise firms. CSPs are making a significant effort now to reorientate and rescale their organization capabilities. And this is to be able to address and learn how to infuse 5G technologies into the B2B environments. The technology emergence, well, we can see that the industry is learning and fast how to integrate and operate the advanced SLAs at a rather terrific rate, actually. Naturally, when it comes to new infrastructure, new technology, there is a learning curve to push through. We have high hopes because of all the investments and willingness for the industry to participate in this. I can also reiterate web scalers, CSPs, and all the O&Ms engaged in the industry. We see a lot of new collaborations taking place, and great examples of that is Dish, Deutsche Telekom, Verizon, and AT&T. And there we can see there is a huge adaptation of new architectures and operating models. And this will enable innovation, provisioning, and performance at the scale we have not seen before. So what is then the benefits we can see right now from the 5G? The energy consumption per bit. So we can transport a lot more bits in the networks at a lower energy consumption. We have talked about fixed wireless access, and in those applications, we both can use more bandwidth, but also new spectral efficiency features in 5G. 5G core network can be used where slicing and performance are considered to be key. And we can see, if you look at the business, that we have a lot of use cases of capabilities emerging. In Europe, we have examples of utility companies that delivers electricity, gas, electrical vehicle charging, internet, TV. They have this particular company I'm thinking about. They have a regional 3.7 gigahertz license for private 5G, and they do both internal sensoring and remote control in their network. And they also give business to business internally with fixed wireless connection. Engine overhaul maintenance. We talked about the pandemic and the COVID. It was extremely difficult to get highly trained and capable engineers to fly out to do engine inspections for the airlines. So one example is a huge European air company that used 5G and AR/VR technology to inspect the engines from the manufacturers. We can also see airports and seaports are emerging, where they have a multi-tenant approach. Smart factories. Also, we drink our own champagne, so we have it in our Oulu factory, where we produce our equipment. North America, we can see local governments are buying small amounts of spectrum to give coverage to unserved communities and businesses. And this is to bridge the consumer and enterprise digital divide. We can see this in communities in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Colorado. We can see that many university campus has enabled the AR VR capabilities. We can see that all the CSPs in North America are providing augmented sport experiences for sports stadiums. And also drone video, where we can see that 5G is enabling 2D and 3D mapping. In Asia, multiple car manufacturers in Japan, Singapore, Korea, like Hyundai, Toyota, are using 5G to augment their factory processes, manufacturing processes. We have autonomous driving trials coming up in Korea, Japan, New Zealand, using V2X on millimeter wave spectrum, 28 gig in these cases. And Nokia and CSPs are also establishing co-innovation labs, open innovation labs, and there Nokia, in one example, are working with TMO in the US. We also, and I will provide the link after the meeting, we also have a white paper that you can find on the web about 5G use cases if you would like to dive into this deeper. But safe to say is that we are in the beginning of a new era of the use case evolution. Industries are becoming much better versed with the technology, but we need to see more adaptation and transformation to accelerate. The newer use cases we're seeing is industrial ultra low latency, where you want to combine the high performance in industrial environments. We can see that one interesting area is robotics to human interactions in combination of video recognition, gesture controls, and voice commands. Here we can see that the leading industries are manufacturing, utilities, construction, ports, and airport. These industries will use a combination of 6G spectrum, below sub-6 spectrum, sorry, and millimeter wave. We have also done studies where we can see that the CSPs have the opportunity to drive up to 8% revenue growth in a period of 18 months by addressing campus and high-performance industrial environments. We can provide more information on that.
Mikael, I guess what you're saying is it's the beginning of a journey, but you're definitely seeing both on the consumer side, be it what you talked about, augmented sports experience, other experiences, and then of course a large set of use cases that beyond the theory we're seeing in deployment, be it in smart factories, be it in industrial, preventive maintenance, autonomous vehicles, be it in mobility use cases, be it in So what you're saying is that you're beginning to see real tangible revenue opportunities emerge from some of these spaces.
We do.
I don't know, Miro.
We do, but there's also a lot of possibilities to increase the revenue going forward. There's a lot of locked-in value here.
Understand. And I don't know if Miro, you have any thoughts here as well.
And Mikael, let's coordinate this next time. I think you've pretty much covered all my notes. But nothing. I think it was a very thorough answer. No, it's a very thorough answer. Just for fun, I'll add that did you know that IoT was coined in 2000? You know that by Kevin Ashton, right? And you know, I always think it's interesting that it's only now, so many years later, that we are talking about, hey, is this going to actually happen now? Are we going to really have IoT, right? So I'll just add briefly that I do agree with the poll that we had earlier. I am seeing the early stages of you know, massive machine type communications, and which is one of the pillars of 5G, right? And in fact, I have by the way, before joining Rakuten, I had a startup I'm in the Bay Area, and I had a startup in Silicon Valley, and I was in the telecommunication industry, so I know how brutal it is to be in that space and how to try to sell to that space. And but I see people, you know, entrepreneurs entering IoT because it's an opportunity to actually, you know, be in this industry, but also have a chance to be successful. Right? So I am seeing, you know, the same things that Mikhail said, and it's that is an area where there is definitely a lot of momentum, and I do anticipate to see that growth, and also from an economical point of view as well.
Thank you, Miro. And yes, you know, we've been talking about this for a while, so that's why hearing some of these real deployments, and as we talked about, unlocking the potential for more is very encouraging to hear. And I guess, Professor Costas, I know we are right at the start of 5G, despite the 150 plus deployments, but there's already been a lot of discussion as we move, you know, towards 6G. And I was just wondering if, you know, what do you think are some of the next steps as we go towards 6G networks, and any insights to share there?
Well, of course, 5G, we have not seen the full potential of 5G yet, that's for sure. And we will continue seeing the evolution of 5G, maybe to 5.5G with even higher speeds and even lower latencies and increasing reliability. So I still see a lot of things take place around 5G and its evolution. And of course, we will also see somehow the integration of artificial intelligence with 5G. So we will move from the Internet of Everything to the intelligent Internet of Everything. But in parallel with this evolution of 5G, research has already started with regards to 6G, and the challenges there are more or less similar to what we have seen for 5G. So we want higher speeds, higher data rates, better coverage, use of millimeter wave frequencies, etc. So lessons learned from 5G will be very useful in the development of 6G. So in my opinion, priority with regards to our strategy for 6G should be given in research in the fields of telecommunications, microelectronics, photonics, software, and the development of a high quality human resources capital, but also intellectual property in these sectors. And of course, regulators should create an environment which is friendly, supports innovation, and supports business models around 6G, the new technology.
Thank you, Professor. I have to say that I think, at least from the operator side, folks are just waiting to first unlock the full potential before we head there, but encouraging to hear what the elements should be to be tackled, hopefully through 6G. Maybe if I just talk, since we started talking about future, even more future trends, maybe we just come back to other trends and then talk about what we are seeing here today. And I just did want to talk about, I think one of you had raised the point around how sharing can be a powerful way. I think, Mikhail, you talked about it in terms of lowering cost for consumers. And I wonder if, Jocelyn, you have a perspective, because we are seeing a lot of network sharing, right, recently. I mean, we have 100 deals, 100+ deals in place, but if you see the pace of the deals, be it passive or active sharing, it has increased rapidly over the last 4 to 5 years. And do you see this happening? Do you see this accelerating further? What role could regulators play to drive this, to again enable a little bit more on the digital inclusion side?
Yes, you're right. Anyway, network sharing, passive or active, has to be a must now, because on a telco perspective, and I'm talking about Africa, which is the area I know, we are facing what we call a capex wall. We have both to invest on 4G massively, even though this investment will be 5G compatible, easily upgraded, but with a cost of 5G license to manage in parallel with a revenue which will be much more progressive compared to other areas. There will be a must. I mean, network sharing on the if part will be a must-have. Honestly, on Orange side, what I can say is that passive is something that we have done quite massively. So passive throughout arrangement or contracts between telcos or throughout towercos or whatever. This is existing and very, very good, let's say. Active is a little bit slow to manage, but I think all telcos will be obliged to go through. The other question was about the regulators. Do we have a need for further regulation of operating mode? Really, concerning a telco, there is no further regulation on that. I mean, towards the expectation we have towards regulators is that they facilitate. And when it comes to spectrum allocation, for instance, if we talk about network sharing going up to spectrum sharing, I mean, what we expect from regulation is that it's not seen as a loss of revenue for the regulator or as a decrease of competition, but considering that using exactly the same network will not be good for competition. So what we expect is that the allocation and the spectrum policy will be fair. What we expect, as we are going to live with multiple technologies, which is very, very difficult to handle, is that regulation can talk to telcos regarding long-term provision in terms of spectrum allocation. Some of them are let's say, launching not auctions, but action for 5G spectrum allocation with only 1 year visibility, which is very, very difficult to handle with afterwards spectrum fragmentation. So this is something, in a nutshell, what we want is regulator facilitate and take a very clear position about the challenge that represents this new paradigm based on more and more digital, more and more capacity, more and more traffic. I think it's very important. The second thing I want to add is not only the idea is not only on spectrum. What we see is that there are some showstoppers about, let's say, terrestrial capacity when it comes to backbones, when it comes to access to international cables, for instance. We have seen, and this is probably something we can ask to regulators and ministries, successful public-private partnership in order to manage very rapidly and to accelerate backbones and very high broadband capacities where for landlocked countries, for instance. I think this is a way things are going to accelerate in Africa and for very difficult zone. And second thing is probably to promote the idea of open access. This is something we see on very new cables such as Equiano or To Africa. So this is cables which are being installed now. And the open access model, sometimes there are some showstopper from local regulators because this is not a legacy way to access to cable. But I think is a condition to accelerate and dynamize the digital environment and the digital industry in many countries. Because if the access to international capacity is a barrier, it's really something that will slow down the digital, let's say, penetration within enterprises and populations. So that's my position and my concern about your question.
Jocelyn, those are very insightful comments. And as you said, especially for certain geographies, certain areas, this is perhaps almost a must and requires a conducive environment as well to make it happen. Maybe in the interest of time, I'm going to stop. I saw questions on Open RAN. I saw questions on hyperscaler in the audience. I'm going to let my colleague Michael Wilms, if he's still on, help handle these a few questions from the audience before we close at the end. Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vaishali. So I had seen quite a few interesting questions. I know we're also close to time, so I have selected a couple. First of all, I thought a very interesting question from Mark Heseltine, basically asking whether 5G will also provide some opportunities to drastically restructure the market and the way the market works. Maybe first, Mikkel, if you can provide your view on whether 5G is going to change the way the telco markets are structured.
I don't think it will. The sort of access technology per se will change the way we do business. But I think there are a couple of technologies that is emerging into the domain of radio access and also in fiber to homes and other access technology, and that is of course the web scalers. So that has potential to sort of merge the access with a huge data lakes, and in that interaction, I think a lot of interesting and exciting things will happen. But of course, it's already happened. So I think it's more a mix of technologies than 5G as such. It helps, but on its own, I don't think it will change the landscape dramatically.
Yeah, I see your point definitely for the access. I also saw some comments around convergence, submarine cable, backhaul, cloud. Nia, also given your view on what's happening in the backhaul technologies, would you see that the application of your technologies would shift a model from which backhaul is typically invested by every single operator to more open access models or other operators providing backhaul services to license holders or MNOs?
Yes, Michael, actually, we are seeing some of that happening in the industry already. So for example, tower companies who currently own passive infrastructure are also getting into owning active infrastructure and leasing out capacity to telcos. The second thing we are seeing as a trend is that governments are deploying more of these networks, including wireless, backhaul infrastructure, and then they want to lease it out to, telecom operators and wireless ISPs, to deliver services to, others. But going forward, what I think is that, sort of this pay-per-use kind of a model for backhaul can be a really, really interesting business model to sort of scale up the number of operators and to increase the delivery of connectivity, increase the options of delivery of connectivity in especially in the rural areas.
Thank you, Nia. And maybe given time, one last question from Dagafu Hunde. He noticed that there's a huge skill gap, especially also in villages in Africa and other developing countries. And I think the question that he was raising is, can autonomous networks dramatically reduce the requirements for skill sets being deployed locally and thus help close the digital divide? So maybe that's a question for Jocelyn, and then very quickly Miro afterwards. And then I suppose we unfortunately have to wrap up.
Yes, I think so. I mean, in the perspective of future core networks, which is we are at the very beginning of the story, but it's no-brainer for us. Automation will bring, and automation already brings in terms of OSS capabilities, for instance, for existing networks. So definitely yes.
To be honest, when it comes to autonomous networks, it's a topic I can talk about a lot. My team has, so I have an incredible team of scientists, PhDs that have been studying autonomic control for many years. In fact, they're not here today watching this because they are in the ITU focus group, Autonomous Network ITU focus group, which we chair actually, and they are submitting an architecture for autonomous networks, and that is literally what is happening right now in ITU, and it's a scenario I'm very close to. We talk a lot about many technologies in 5G. We talk a lot about radio, and we don't talk as much about the underlying software infrastructure, the big transformation that's happening from a software perspective. We talk about O-RAN. We don't talk about the basic principles of what really O-RAN is. Like, what does it actually promote? It promotes it honestly promotes good software engineering practices. That is all O-RAN does, which are necessary not only for autonomous networks, but these are necessary for future networks. So I think the transformation that we will see in the world really will come from autonomous networks. I honestly think that I have teams that are working on data, teams that are working on AI, and I have teams that work on autonomous networks, and we've bridged the gap between data, AI, and autonomous networks and autonomous control. And what we see is incredible potential in what networks can be capable of once you really implement evolutionary algorithms and using evolutionary controllers as part of a solution which is, by the way, the same way the same way that we have evolved humans, right? So using the same almost natural techniques to create autonomic control in networks, it is fascinating to see the results when you implement these kinds of technologies, and that's just why I'm very excited about the stuff that we're doing, and that's why I'm also excited about the future of networks.
I found this session very interesting and very useful, and I'm very pleased to hear our expert opinions for the future of our networks and services. I'm very pleased to know that everyone consider each other as complementary. That talk about combination of technologies, and also resource sharing, and I'm particularly interested in the focus you talked a lot today on the price, affordable. Secretary General of United Nations, Mr. Guterres, last year called for everybody to work together to connect everybody by the end of 2030 with affordable price, so that you have not heard that call from Secretary General Guterres, but you talked about that today. So that is great. Indeed, to connect another not yet connected half of the population by 2030 is not easy. So we have to further encourage investment in ICT infrastructure, but also we have to use the already existing capacities. Now, you talked about the resources sharing. I also noted your point. I want to highlight a little bit more. Now, when you talk about different technologies, you know that in the sky, you have a lot of satellites. And I was told that a lot of capacity is not used yet, so that they have a potential to be offered to our customers on the territory. And then that now we have more and more satellites to launch into the sky. And we have now new low orbit satellite like SpaceX, Amazon, and OneWeb. They launched many satellites to the sky to connect to each other. So this is something. And then from submarine cables, we also found that more and more submarine cables laying down. And then you talked about open access. And then that the existing submarine cables are not fully used. There are a lot of capacities they are not used. And even towards our operators like Jocelyn, and you are running Orange, and you know yourself very well, from 2G to 3G, 3G to 4G, 4G to 5G, now 5G to 5G, and those investment you put in the previous version, like a 3G, not fully used, then you jump to 4G. 4G you have not fully used, now you have to come to 5G. Now 5G has not been even fully explored because The 5G is not, it's only infrastructure like a highway, and you need a cars, and the cars are not there yet. So that, so when I look at your last questions, that Internet of Things for sure is our future to get traffic, to get revenue. But then we have to encourage SMEs, kind of everywhere to develop solutions, applications to make use our 4G or 5G capacity. Otherwise, where you get your revenue, so that is something also quite important. And not talking about in any particular country, you have not only one operator, you have several operators. If one operator has that kind of capacity not used, what about the others? That in one given national market, you have a lot of capacity there. So to use this one, I think that is also a challenge to us. How can we use the current existing capacities to make best use of this capacity to offer services, while we still encourage investment to extend this infrastructure to connect those not connected yet. And also talking about programs. Now we're talking about a broadband connection to home. It's not the only problem for developing countries. Even the developed country like the United States, I heard from FCC chairman at our WTISD celebrations. She also mentioned that in the United States with the pandemic, now the people are forced to stay at home, but certainly they found that the home connection is not sufficient. And the capacity is very limited. And 10 years ago, we talked about IT, talked about a standard for home networks, and it's not continued. Now, all of a sudden, home network is absolutely important. And then the capacity is not there. I'm in Geneva. My home is not optical fiber connected. It's still so that in the United States, many families have a teleschool for their children, but the capacity is connection to home is not sufficient. So this is a real problem for us. We know with the pandemic, we have these challenges. Now, I think that everybody recognizes it's quite important to continue. Now, with the new security pandemic, you have a limited budget for everything. And then the public health want to have budget, public education want to have budget, and public energy want to have a budget. Then we want to improve our ICT infrastructure. Where to get the budget? So that is a problem. We talked about the Connect Next, 10% people, 15, so 1.5 billion, and we need 400. That is not enough, because if we connect everybody, it's not 1.5 billion only. It's the whole population, and then you need 450 billion trillion. You just name it. And this kind of we have to find the money that is coming from private sector, from our panelists today, where you worked, and the public money is not really there. So that's why we needed to create a good environment to encourage people to pay time to support us. I also highlighted another things over the last 1.5 years. People consider our telecom business is always a profit-making business. We don't need to worry. They're self-sustainable. They always have money. Even many companies, many business or the bankrupt during pandemic, the telecom guys still get rich. They have a woman. That is maybe true, but still, a lot of companies also from our telecom business is bankrupt, and then half population not connected yet. We need new technologies to help us, and you need investment. So that one, I highlight my message, encourage people to continue to support us. So I think that this discussion today is quite important, quite useful. So I appreciate very much all our panelists for all of your very valuable opinions contributed to this debate, and I found it quite useful, quite inspiring to me. I do not consider that this is less important than other activities I have to spend time. It's absolutely important to see our experts, frontline experts, think about the future. So that is marvelous. So, ladies and gentlemen and panelists, I thank you very much. And I have another meeting to join. But anyhow, I stayed here with you from the beginning to the end. I told Vasily I may not be able until the end, but anyhow, I managed to stay with you most of the time. And I hope our experts will find ITU's platform useful. And I'm very pleased to hear that Miro, your guys are working with our Fox group. That is great. We encourage you all. And Aki is our longtime partners, and you like Konstantin, Yoselin, and Michael, that is our members already. for a long time. So we profit of your long time support and cooperation with us. So thank you very much for your for your meeting. Without your permission, I just step in to share with you my messages. I hope this ICT discovery world, starting from today, we are look at meaningful outcomes at the end, so that our future will be beneficial from what we heard from you, from the others. Thank you very much.
I guess, Michael, thank you for hosting that. Thank you to the panelists for your, it was really super to hear your thoughts. I think we could spend the whole day on this, but we've really run out of time. Thank you to the audience for your participation, for listening. Just to remind everyone, the ITU Digital World 2021 continues on 8th of September with a session on 5G fueling digital transformation. Today, or is it tomorrow? And by the way, today, and I'll hand over to Mr. Julian Smith in a minute, there will be a chance to continue the conversation in an informal virtual networking session through GatherTown. So Julian, over to you. And again, a huge thanks to our wonderful panelists, as well as huge thanks to ITU Telecom for hosting us. And of course, to His Excellency, Dr. Phan Tham, and to Mr. Hu Lin Zhao, the Secretary General of ITU, for giving us all this opportunity.